Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Jonathan sent me a note about a story that caught my attention as well from the Associated Press. And by the way, this story has to do with something I hear a lot when I talk about jury selection. When I talk about people who get called for jury duty and they go, but I don't want to serve on a jury. And I say, well, you got to understand that someday if you ever get in trouble and you need a jury, you'll be glad people showed up. So you should kind of return the favor even if you're doing it in advance. And as an attorney, I've shown up before on a day where we were told show up for jury trial, and the judge said, we don't have enough people here to select a jury. People ignored the jury notices. But I've had people tell me, they say, Steve, if I got called for jury duty and I don't want to serve and I show up, can't I just get out of it by going, well, I hate, and they name a ethnic group, for instance. Or they go, I think everybody's guilty. Or I hate the cops. And can't I just say something crazy like that and get out of jury duty? And I like to remind people that it's fun to say these things like at a party. But when you're in court and you've been sworn, because they actually swear you to tell the truth and all that before jury selection begins, then you're going to have to be swearing to these things. And there will be a court reporter writing down your answers. And a judge is sitting there looking at you. And you're going to say, I hate all fill in the blank in that setting? Are you really? And so I've heard of people saying that they would do that, and they usually laugh and go, I would just say I hate cops, or I hate this, or I hate that. But I've never actually heard of somebody who really did that. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure it has happened. It just didn't make the news. But here, this made the news because a New York judge said he couldn't be on a jury because he thinks all defendants are guilty. And now that that's been publicized, he has resigned his position on the bench. But as you can imagine, it's one thing for me to say, I think all defendants are guilty. But you might go, Steve, you're a lawyer. Oh, that would be an issue for me. I wouldn't say that, and I couldn't say that. But just a regular non-lawyer, non-judge saying it, makes you wonder. But an actual judge saying it is problematic. So an upstate New York judge has resigned after he got out of jury duty by claiming he couldn't be impartial because he thought everyone brought before a court is guilty. And here's the crazy thing. If he honestly thought that, he was not fit to be a judge. But the fact that he thought that and he said it out loud shows that there's something else even worse than the fact that he's not fit for the job going on there. Because mathematically, you'd have to assume that not everyone who's arrested is guilty. Not everyone who's charged is guilty. Once in a while, and we've heard the stories. We know for a fact there are stories about people who were put on trial who didn't do it. Not just that they weren't found guilty, they didn't do it. Later on, it's like, oh, this person did it. And we've seen people who went to jail for crimes they didn't commit. And we've seen a lot of people tried for crimes they didn't commit. So to say, I'm a judge and I think everybody brought before me is guilty, that's a problem. That is a problem. So the judge has been a justice of the Petersburg Town Court for about a decade. He left his post after being charged with misconduct by a state judicial commission. So keep in mind that attorneys, for instance, are regulated by the state bar. And there is usually a commission that oversees judges, often under the auspices of the state Supreme Court. Most states that have constitutions describe the layout of the government, and it's often similar to that of the federal government, that you have an executive, you have a legislative, and then you've got a judicial branch, 3 branches. And so quite often, the head of the judicial branch is the Supreme Court. And so I know in New York, it's actually something else. They played with those descriptions, but there is a court at the top that often has or oversees a department or a group or a panel or something that takes care of judicial discipline. And judges do have to follow rules. And so one of the things that judges must always do is appear to be impartial and avoid the appearance of impropriety. And so for a judge to openly state on the record in open court, I think everyone brought before me is guilty, Wait, what? By definition, is not qualified to be a judge, and the commission took action. According to court transcripts, the judge tried to avoid serving on a jury in 2023 by first saying that he was a judge, and then saying, and here's the quote, this is a quote, verbatim, "I know everybody come in front of me. I know they are guilty. They would not be in front of me." So he's basically saying, hey, something brought you here, right? The reason you're here is you're guilty. And if he thinks that the moment he sees them, he's got a problem because he's supposed to be impartial. And by the way, there's a bigger problem. And remember that you're presumed innocent. And you don't become guilty until and unless convicted by a jury of your peers or a judge in a bench trial. And heaven forbid you get a bench trial in front of a judge who says, I think all people brought before me are guilty. Because why bother going through the trial? Why bother? What's the show trial for? Just to see if there's any technicalities that the fancy pants lawyers can yank out of thin air and get this person off? So that right there is a very serious problem. I know of a very good friend of mine that I went to law school with, who is a defense attorney now in Minnesota. And he does nothing but criminal trials. He's very, very good at it. Very, very good at it. And he told me, and I've heard other attorneys do this as well, but if you do it right, it can be quite impressive. And that is during jury selection, when you're first doing voir dire, asking questions of the panel. You can ask them, hypothetically, as you look at my client, do you know if he's innocent or guilty? And a lot of people will say, oh, I don't know. We haven't had a trial yet. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He's innocent right now because he hasn't been proven guilty. He's innocent until proven guilty. Therefore, as he sits in front of you, you know that he's innocent. So the judge who says, I know that they get brought before me, they're guilty, otherwise they wouldn't be there. No, they're innocent. They haven't been tried yet, have they? So he was eventually dismissed from the jury after he continued to argue that he could not be impartial, saying, no, it would not be fair. And those are court transcripts from a special grand jury that was impaneled in the county to hear this case. So they called a grand jury and apparently questioned him about it. And he continued to argue this. So now it's unclear if he argued it at the trial or argued it in front of the grand jury. I'm not sure if he testified in front of the grand jury. That's another story altogether. But the judge who was overseeing the jury selection reported the man to state officials. And so another thing you should know is there's rules that attorneys follow and rules that judges follow. Now you might say, but Steve, judges are attorneys. Therefore, oh no, they get to follow two sets of rules. I only have to follow the one. So obviously, I don't follow the rules that judges follow, but I'm aware of them. But I can tell you that one of the rules that judges follow is that when they hear or see or become aware of somebody who's breaking the law, they're required to report it. And so when this judge says, I think everyone brought before me is guilty, and therefore that's how I treat them, whether he's breaking the law or not, no, he's breaking one of the judicial rules. And the judicial rules say that when you are a judge, you should be impartial. Everyone brought before you gets a fair shake, and they all start out innocent, unless and until proven guilty. And so I'm purposely saying unless and until, because a lot of people when they hear, until proven guilty, implies that you will be found guilty, and not necessarily. So the point here, though, is that the judge overseeing the jury selection heard a judge say in open court, under oath, that I believe everyone brought before me is guilty. That's why they're there. So when he says that, the judge overseeing that trial, I'm assuming the rules in New York are similar to those in Michigan, he's required to report the guy to whoever oversees judges. So he was eventually dismissed from serving on the jury, but he had argued beyond that. So the judge overseeing the jury selection reported the man to state officials. At a judicial commission hearing last year, The judge said he understood that defendants are supposed to be considered innocent until proven guilty, but that he still felt that people wouldn't be in court if they didn't commit crimes. Now, that's the kind of thinking that I know it exists, but the man's not fit to be a judge, obviously. And we've heard that before, where you hear a story where somebody got arrested and then some bad things happened and they're describing what happened, and some people stop listening when they hear, well, he got arrested. Anything that happens after that's your fault. You shouldn't have gotten arrested. Wait, what? And there are people who think that. And it's the same way that some people think, like, well, all such and such are criminals. Whether it's a group of people by the organization they belong to, or a group of people based on the color of their skin, you can't have that kind of thinking, especially not as a judge. Think about that. So right now, a man was a judge for 10 years. Right now, a lot of people are thinking to themselves, wait, I was convicted in that judge's courtroom. And now he admits that he thought I was guilty the first day he saw me. And now I don't know if he ever did any bench trials, but if he did any bench trials where there was no jury and somebody opted to let him decide, they probably got a pretty good ground for an appeal on that one. I also don't know what kind of cases he was hearing, because he's a justice of the Petersburg town court. And so that might be a lower level court that's hearing nothing but like traffic tickets and jaywalking tickets and parking offenses. I don't know. But as you can imagine, I'm talking hypothetically here. If you were in the highest level trial court in your state and you were put on trial for something, and you go, hey, I'm worried a jury is going to react badly to the scene of the crime or something. So I'm going to opt for a bench trial. I'm going to let a judge decide my fate. And you opt to let a judge decide your fate who believes you're guilty the moment you enter his courtroom. And I'm always curious about these things. I don't know if we'll ever know this or not, but I'd be curious to see if somebody could do the statistical analysis of this and discover whether or not there were more guilties in his courtroom than there were in the courtroom, say, next door or next town over. It makes you wonder. But like I said, I've heard from so many people, oh, if I get called for jury duty, I'll just say I hate cops. I just hate this or I hate that. Or I think all these people are guilty. I think all those people are guilty. And I go, you have to understand that it's going to be kind of difficult to say that out loud after you've been sworn to tell the truth. And judge, and all these other people are watching you, attorneys, court reporters. Your words are being recorded. That's what this is. That's a court reporter, old school. But most people, if they were to do that, would get cross-examined by the judge, because the judge will participate in jury selection. And the judge will ask you a bunch of questions. And, you'd have to stand up to that. And if you did, you might get kicked off the jury. And it might also be that the judge will look at you and go, hey, this person's trying to get out of jury duty. That's not good either. So it's a crazy story, because if this was simply a person who said that, I'd still do a story about it and say, hey, somebody finally did that thing they're always talking about. They did that thing. Well, now, no, the last type of person who should be doing this would be a judge. And a judge did it. And by the way, every time I mention swearing, I'm going to get a bunch of people going, Steve, I'd get out by just refusing to put my hand on the Bible. Nowadays, you're not required to put your hand on a Bible to take an oath. And you're also not required to swear an oath. You'll be asked, generally speaking, do you swear or affirm or promise to tell the truth? Raise your right hand and say yes. So all you're going to be doing is raising your hand and saying, yes, I'll tell the truth. So they got rid of that a long time ago, because I know a lot of people have already typed. They've already typed, I wouldn't be on the jury because I'd refuse to take an oath. I'd say it's against my religion. Does your religion say you can't promise to tell the truth? Really? Haven't heard of that one. But again, maybe I don't get out enough. So Jonathan and everybody else, thanks for sending it from the Associated Press. New York judge resigns after saying he can't be on a jury since he thinks all defendants are guilty. After all, that's why they're there. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Friendship has a stronger effect on happiness than income.